Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, regardless of the time zone you are in. Thank you for tuning in to this month's webinar, which is on intranet news teams, creating a decentralized intranet news and content structure or system. I'm your host, Toby Ward, founder of this webinar series, running for 12, 13 years now. It is a monthly webinar for those of you who are new to the webinar. And we do it essentially every month of the year with the odd exception around holidays. Next month will be the last month before we take our summer hiatus and I venture into the great outdoors with kids and family. We are intranet experts, consultants, designing, planning, building intranets for more than 18 years now, and have been blessed to work with some fantastic organizations along the way. If you're a client of ours, thank you for the business. If you're thinking about becoming a client and need help with your intranet, well, thank you for considering us. And by all means, give us a shout, drop us a line. Let's jump right into the webinar. 3 key learnings for today. We're going to talk about identifying and training news and content providers, writers, publishers to the internet. We'll talk a little bit about change management, because if you build it, they will not come necessarily. You need to actually kind of go out and put your sales hat on and do a lot of communications and education. And content management's a big part of it too. Not just the technology, but the process that goes into creating, publishing, and managing content online. There's lots that go into it. But before we begin with the slides and talk about the people and the process and the technology, let's find out just a quick 2-question poll. What is your biggest news or content problem on the internet? Is it a quantity issue, not enough news, or is it a quality issue? You're not delivering good enough news, nice enough, intelligent enough, well written enough. Is it quantity or quality? I suspect it's a healthy mix. And then if you ask a third question, both, I think most of you probably would say both. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on a webinar today, right? All right, we'll give you 5 more seconds and close the voting. 3, 2, 1. All right. It is more an issue of quality than quantity. We are going to be speaking a little bit about both, specifically a lot in driving quantity as well, and about quality of the actual content itself. So, thank you for your vote. Let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about identifying and training people. Firstly, you need to attract them. Who is going to deliver news and content? Who's going to create it? For those of you in corporate communications, most of you on the webinar today, you cannot be creating all of the content yourselves. You just do not have the time and the staff to do so. So you need other people within the organization to help create news. Exactly who? Well, I just muted myself by accident. Hopefully that wasn't for very long. Starting with enlisting volunteers, because again, you only have so much budget. If you thought this was a webinar about hiring and whom to hire to create all your content, you were wrong. Most people don't have a lot of budget to hire other writers, contractors, or employees. So you need to look to people within the organization to create content. And frankly, that's the way it should be. You want the experts, the holder of the news, the creator of the news, to be creating the content and hopefully doing it online. So who in the organization is doing that? Well, obviously, folks that do writing and are writing in marketing, communications, administration and administrative. Think admin assistants of executives. There's a lot of news and a lot going on in the executive suite that most people will never hear about simply because they're not set up to share that information. They're focused on their meetings and the big priorities of the day. It's not a communications team, and it's an executive team. But those administrative assistants are the keeper of a lot of stories and knowledge. You need to tap into them. Set up a regular call with them, or just informally call them once a month. What's going on? Hey, anything interesting happening? What sort of town halls are planned? What sort of speeches? What sort of events? Speeches and presentations from executives are gold mines for content that you can repurpose, rewrite, or summarize in a news story. HR, hey, they know what the people are doing. They know about success stories, client wins, sales wins, etc. New hires, community events, community initiatives, United Way, fundraising programs, that sort of stuff. Sales. Most people don't tap the sales organization, but this is where revenue comes from. So new clients and client success stories, the sales group knows about it. So get in with the key salespeople or managers or administrative assistants, phone them or email them once a month, find out what's going on. Maybe get yourself invited to a regular meeting so that you can take notes and from that, build a story or two. They want to tell their stories. It's all about self-promotion. We'll come back to that in a second. Ultimately, what you want to set up is a structure that dovetails with your governance structure that depicts where the content is coming from and who has responsibility for it. In this bank example, they've got content contributors and creators in corporate communications, HR, retail, finance, legal, technology, realty services, risk management compliance. Who would have thought that the folks in risk management could churn out good content? Well, there's got to be the odd story, right? They're certainly creating content that they're owning in their own pages, right? So there's got to be the odd story. Create this structure and train them on what good writing is and what good content is, and you will see the content flow. You'll see more content and better content. Why will they do it, and what do you have to offer them? Well, for starters, free promotion. Believe me, executives are always looking to toot their own horn. So are sales folks. They want attention. They want to be seen as driving value for the organization. They want to get their name out there. They want to get their success stories out there. Pizza lunches. Invite folks out that are potential writers or contributors to a free pizza lunch and discuss what you're looking for. Talk about the elements of a good story. You guys are in communications, you've studied communications, and many of us have come from journalism, so we know what makes a good story. Impact, conflict, success, timely events, financial numbers, all this sort of stuff. Basically, anytime an executive speaks, have a story contest. Have a contest online, started as a news story, encourage people to submit their stories via an online form or an email address, preferably an online form. because then you can prompt them to write their own headline, write an introduction or a summary or the full story. You'd be surprised how many people within the organization fancy themselves as writers or want to be writers if given the opportunity. It's not 1 in 10, but it could be 1 in 100, depending on the organization. A photo contest. Once you get photos, there are stories there, right? Photos from town halls, different meetings, public events, fundraisers. How about just the team? How about just employee profiles? A sales contest. Who's got the best sales win story? Or a funny story, humorous story from a customer, right? Contests bring the folks out and will bring the content out, because at the end of a contest, there's a reward. It could be a gift card. It could be a free lunch. It could be lunch with the CEO or the CFO or whomever. I mean, get creative. What do people want? What motivates them? What would really get their attention? I like the idea of lunch with the president or the CEO or executive director because it's unique and you get on the chief honcho's schedule, right? And you get a free lunch out of it, probably at a swanky restaurant on them. It makes the CEO and president look good. It attracts people to the contest. It attracts great content. Next up, submit news. You're actively encouraging folks to submit news, and you're doing so on the homepage, as our client P&M Resources does on their intranet homepage, just down there, middle column on the bottom, red circle. Submit news. They launched this when they launched their new intranet with virtually no change management. So no, hey, give us your news stories. It got worked into the odd news story at the bottom or the newsletter. And within a month or two, they were getting 15 to 20 news stories a week. And they've only got 1,700 employees. Let's do the math on that. More than 1% of the population was contributing news on a weekly basis. That's fantastic. 15 to 20 news stories per week. Cisco Systems used to do that on their homepage over there in the right-hand column. They got so much news, they don't do it anymore, right? You get to a point where you're going to have so much news that it's not all going to make it on the site, right? And you have to be picky and choosy. Picky and choosy? Are those real words? Am I a communicator? I don't know. Someone Google that for me and let me know. Is picky and choosy a real phrase, or did I just make that up? Pick and choose the good stuff. And when you click on Submit News, you get a little form. And on that form, some guidelines and a click to the full guidelines on what creates and constitutes good content and news. In the form, here's the header, here's the summary, here's the body text, or encourage people just to put it in point form and you can write it for them. They're not all professional writers. All content is created equal. It's not going to go live right away to the homepage. It's going to come to you in communications and then you edit it and then publish it live if it's worthwhile. Maybe it's not worthy for the homepage and it goes in a newsletter or some corner of the intranet. But what does it take to put that little link on the homepage, submit news? Nothing. That's a 5-minute job, really. Yeah, create a little form, but if you're not SharePoint Online or Office 365, you can create that form in 5 to 10 minutes. And most CMS solutions have something that will do that in just a few minutes. This is such an easy win for you and any organization. Some organization like Vancouver Coastal Health, right here in my backyard in Vancouver, British Columbia, are encouraging folks on their external website to submit news. Share your story. Information is great, but it's all about the people. There you go. And if you're an employee, Here's the link to the intranet for submissions. Learn more about the new intranet here and the guidelines and parameters for news and content and what makes it on to the intranet, or in this case, the website as well. What type of stories are you looking for? What do you want to hear? What do people want to read? You'd be surprised. It's not all about quarterly results. That's good, and people want to hear about it, and strategy. People definitely want to read about it. But you know what brings them in more? People stories. Yeah. Executive profiles. Do a profile on every single executive. You could just take their bio and then send them an email saying, we're doing executive profiles, would love 5 minutes of your time to either chat or answer the following 6 questions. What keeps you busiest? What does your day-to-day look like? What keeps you up at night? What are your personal interests? And how about a funny story from work over the last year or two involving employees or customers, something humorous, something interesting. People don't read bios, really. They may glance at it once in a while, but have you gone and read the bio of each and every executive within your organization? I bet you even in corporate communications, you folks haven't read the bio of every single executive in the organization. And you're not going to run out of executives either, because let's say you do once a month. You probably have, the average organization has maybe a dozen or several dozen executives. By the time you get through the list, new ones have already arrived. Executive speeches, they're always giving different speeches internally and externally. Get a copy of the speech, spin it into a story. Easy peasy. Peasy, I wonder if that's in the dictionary. I know it's in the Urban Dictionary. I didn't make it up though. Some of you are familiar with that phrase. Those of you in Europe and Asia, maybe not as much, but easy peasy, right? Employee profiles encourage people to talk about themselves, or a communications folk in a certain team or a different content contributor to ask their team for content in terms of their bio and the 5 or 6 questions. If you send an email saying, send me your bio and answer these 5 or 6 questions, you're not going to get everyone that will take you up on that, but quite a few folks will. It's a great source of content and people love reading them. Believe me, they read employee profiles or executive profiles in greater numbers than they do the odd internal news speech spun out press release. Sales wins. Not done enough. From client to client to client, rarely do I see sales win stories. This was low-hanging fruit. Who are the latest clients? How did they become clients? How much revenue are they generating for the organization? Is it that you as an organization is providing for that new client? And it may not be a sale per se. You may be not for profit. It could be a government project or initiative. It could be something to do with fundraising. It could just be a feel-good story. Hospitals and healthcare systems do this all the time. Survivor stories, for example. Even we saw from ConocoPhillips a few months ago when we did the webinar on podcasting, the most listened to and downloaded podcast, internal employee podcast on the intranet, was a cancer survivor story. And they just talked about their journey through cancer and beating it and surviving. That was the most listened to podcast. And by the way, the podcasts on average get twice the amount of eyeballs and ears than the average news story on the homepage. So when you're doing these profiles and these stories, bring along a tape recorder if you're not doing it by email, because you could spin it into a podcast, or you could just simply record the story yourself as a narrator and talk about whatever profile or story it is that you're working on. Customer service wins. How someone in customer service helped out a client or customer or stakeholder in some way that improved their lives or their work or their day or made their day. Believe me, customer service teams, they're itching to get that stuff out. Why wouldn't they? But they need to be asked. So ask them. This is Capital Power's Intranet, smaller energy utility in Edmonton, Canada. You see the news that they're doing on the homepage and how they segment it. Solid first quarter 2018 results, and Cardinal Point Wind Project moves ahead. Okay, so that's a standard financial internal story. But here's one, but just below it on mental health. Mental health, continuing the conversation. A big welcome to this year's SWEP, a special internal team. A profile on EPCOR Tower employees. Those employees in one particular office location in Edmonton. There's a featured photo. Scrolling down the page, there's an employee spotlight. Oh, people love that. Speaking of good content, it's not really content per se, but a marketplace, buy and sell. You see what they've done here on the bottom? People are selling their stuff through the intranet and other people are buying it. Another way to engage folks. If you draw them into the buy and sell, they're going to be more likely to read some of that content that you've got. Here's some other content they're doing. It's not all about business, of course. An employee suits up with the Edmonton Oilers NHL hockey team alumni. A power outage. One of their hockey teams goes undefeated to win local managers cup. And a story on being Alberta Top Employer Award 3 years in a row. Notice what's also making good content here. Photos. Photos. Sometimes you can get stories just from photos themselves. Sometimes the photo alone tells the story. I mean, look at the hockey story, the second story there, and even the first story. It's mostly photos, right? And people will read it. You mix it in with the hardcore business stuff like Roxborough completes maintenance outage over 7,000 hours of safe and successful work, and you're delivering on your mandatory requirement to communicate important initiatives within the organization and mixing in the touchy-feely stuff that people really want to see and read as well. So you're working engagement from both levels. And here's a perfect example too of a typical story that may not have otherwise surfaced to the system or the front page without that sort of news structure or team in place. Roxborough completes maintenance outage. Well, who cares, right? But over 7,000 hours of safe and successful work. Not only is that probably a good story, but there's probably some learnings in there for other teams and other locations to learn and apply in their location, earning and saving the company money. Here we see Coca-Cola's intranet homepage, Connect. Some of the news that they've got on their page. North America Grand Challenge. Do you have a growth mindset? So linking in with a strategic initiative. Everyone's got a strategic plan and strategic objectives and initiatives for the year. So what sort of content are you creating as a corporate communicator or writer to support a strategic initiative or thrust, such as growth? Do you have a growth mindset? Here's what it takes. Cook County Board votes to repeal Chicago area beverage tax. Our disaster relief efforts, community and volunteer efforts, these make good stories as well. You just have to get out there and find them and talk about them, as well as just the fun stuff. Photographs and photographers of Pfizer. These are all from Pfizer, shared through Yammer and Yammer channels on the corporate intranet. Summer vacation photos, dog photos, and even the New York summer softball team photos. Why not? Mix in the fun with the business. Suffice it to say, writing for the intranet is not like writing for print. I don't need to tell you about this. You want to emphasize this, though, with your contributors and the inverted pyramid style. For those of you who don't know the inverted pyramid style, it's putting the most important information up top and working your way down to the least important information, because employees don't read news stories. They scan them. That's another reason why employees' photos are so popular. Just a quick look, and then we move on to that form that I was looking for. Of course, change management has to play a part. You need to market, educate, and communicate. You need executive sponsorship. You need them to contribute their stories. You need them to talk about what's going on in the organization. That will increase contributions elsewhere. It's the trickle-down effect. Walk the walk, talk the talk. Orient and educate your content contributors, provide training, provide the content management system, and tell them how to use it, and then train them as well on writing and what are the elements of a good story and how to write online in terms of a news story. Other change management initiatives, tools, newsletter, an internal newsletter, weekly newsletter, we'd recommend at the least monthly. Believe me, email versus social media, there is no comparison. Email delivers the results. Email delivers the eyeballs. If you don't have a monthly or a weekly newsletter, probably weekly, that summarizes the news on your homepage, you need to. And of course, content management, you need to have a plan and operate from a plan that says who does what when and where's the content coming from. Assess the current content and processes, what's working well, what's not, where do we shore up our weaknesses, where do we focus our energies in the future. Obviously, you need the proper information architecture. You need to think about workflow and taxonomy. All content needs to be tagged, of course, with the appropriate labels so that it's easily found by the search engine and easily navigated to throughout the information architecture. Managing the content online, repurposing, rewriting, editing, formatting. What's the process and threshold for deletion and archiving of content and the renewal process? All that needs to be addressed in a plan. Maintenance, storing, accessing, reusing, and measurement, analytics and analysis. What content is working best and what are they reading? So that you know what to deliver in the future. You should ultimately have a content management plan that addresses all of this stuff, anything to do with content. What the content is, what's important, who's responsible for it, what are the processes and workflows responsible for it. If you don't have this, you need to put it in place. There's our phone number and email at the top. Give us a shout if you need a hand creating it, because you need to start from a plan. You just can't jump into it willy-nilly. Yes, I recommend you all run out and put the submit news link on the homepage. Start with that, but you do need a plan because you've got to train folks, right? And you have to have the system in place as well. That ensures, for example, every page has a date, it has an expiry date and a process for expiring content. It has to have the name of the content creator, author, or publisher, terms of use, closed meta tags from the taxonomy, open optional tags, sharing and social features such as commenting or rating or sharing. These are mandatory elements now on every news page on the intranet. We're just out of time now, so we'll wrap up with some lessons for success and then open up for questions. If you want to stay late, you can enter your question on the right-hand side within the panel. Slides will be, of course, published to slideshare.net/prescient, but of course, you're going to get a link to not only where you can find the slides, but the full video replay of this webinar. Lessons for success: hire, prompt, cajole, reward writers. It's all about attraction. Get out there and prompt them, reward them, encourage them to contribute content through a homepage link and through your offline system structure, hierarchy, org chart of news and content creators and generators. Sell, market, educate, train employees wherever you can, all if necessary, about content and creating content. You'd be surprised how many people want to toot their own horn at least once a year. So if you can train them all, even through an online training module, the better off you'll be. Content management plan and technology. You need to put the plan in place. You need to have the content management system to pull this off. And we're not talking about the technology today because we're talking about people and process. That's another webinar, which we've done recently, in fact. Plan for success. Obviously, you've got to have that plan. And executives attract eyeballs, right? Start with them, right? Start with their profile. Start with their speeches. The more they're talking about what they're doing, others will follow, right? And it will also have the trickle-down effect. They see the boss talking about their success stories or what's keeping them up at night, and some will have the idea what maybe they should be doing that too. All right, let's find out what we should do before we open up for questions, and I attend your questions here. I see some of you are putting in questions in the panel on the right. What do you want to do for the next webinar in a month's time? What should the next webinar be? Cast your vote now, and we'll just keep this open for 20-25 seconds, and then we will deliver custom made to your request the next webinar in a month's time. You want to learn the latest on SharePoint and Office 365. I was just in Las Vegas last week for the SharePoint conference. Lots to discuss, lots to share with you. How about an in-depth case study? A really good intranet? How about building and selling a business case for a redesign, for an intranet redesign? How do you go about winning the bucks for a redesign? Or should we talk about change management and driving use and adoption on the intranet? We'll leave this open for 5 more seconds. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's close, but you are saying you want to learn more about the latest on SharePoint and Office 365. Done. That's what we're going to do in the next webinar in June. I'm not sure whether or not we'll do 30 or 60 minutes. What do you prefer? 30 minutes or 60 minutes? Let me know here in the input box or in the question box, or you can fire me a note and I will tailor the next webinar accordingly. Of course, make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter if you haven't already done so at prescientdigital.com to be informed about the latest events and news. The next newsletter actually comes out later today. Scroll to the bottom of the page, put in your email, and you're done. Last but not least, some fantastic case studies, examples and speakers at this year's Digital Workplace and Intranet Global Forum. There's just some of them. It's by far and away the best event we've ever done in now the 11 years of doing these conferences. It's at Times Square in November in New York. The early bird rate is open. Go and reserve and buy your ticket today. intranetglobalforum.com. Okay, questions. What do we have to learn? What further can we learn about news and news teams? 30 minutes is just about right. Okay, excellent. Can we access the old webinars somewhere? Yes, Elizabeth. We do highlight past webinars on our homepage at prescientdigital.com, and you can get a link to some of the video replays there. Otherwise, if you've registered, you've automatically got an email that says if you attended the email or the webinar, or you missed it even if you missed it, you get the link to the full video replay. If there's something in specific that you want that you can't find, just drop me a note and I will send it to you. Okay. Wow, that's it for questions. We covered it all. You learned everything that you needed to learn about creating an internet news team in 30 minutes. How's that for efficiency? I'd say pretty good. Well, thank you for tuning in then. If a question does come up, feel free to drop me a note. There's my email. There's our phone number. There's the website. We've also launched a couple of new white papers. If you haven't checked out the download section, there's a new white paper called SharePoint for Communicators. And we've just reissued, after 10 years, the new Intranet ROI white paper. Brand new, all rejigged, new examples, new case studies, really good stuff, really good data and examples of how people are measuring ROI. So until next month and the next webinar on the latest and greatest in SharePoint and Office 365, we will bid you adieu. Thank you again for tuning in. You'll get a link to the slides and the full video replay tomorrow. Until then, happy intraneting.